and very warm welcome to this special roundtable discussion on the topic of leveraging traceability and life cycle intelligence. As you know, with quality, sustainability, and responsibility towards the environment becoming a key factor for the consumers, over the next 1 hour, we are going to understand how companies are demonstrating their commitment to the quality, sustainability, and environmental responsibility. Also, how they are using integrated technology platform to have an end-to-end visibility and traceability across the entire value chain. To lead the discussion, today I'm joined by Mr. Punit Modi, lead supply chain at Mondelēz India, Mr. Ankur Bhaumik, COO MTR Foods, Mr. Sathyanarayanan Venkataraman, Senior Vice President Business at Bewakoof.com, and Mr. Madhan Thiruvenkatachalam, Industry Portfolio Lead at Siemens India. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and taking out time for this roundtable discussion. Let me begin with Mr. Punit. Mr. Punit, what we have been observing that most consumer now expect that the brand and the businesses to be accountable and transparent. They seek a kind of both authenticity and the quality assurance. Would you like to share if you have done anything in this space or also your general assessment of how can companies demonstrate their commitment to the quality, sustainability, and environmental responsibility? Mr. Punit.
Hi, thanks, Ujale. Hi, everyone. I'm Punit from Mondelēz. I think it's a very interesting topic in terms of how do companies show their commitment more for quality and for environment. I would say it is for two things. One is there are a lot of internal commitments that the companies have, right, to reach their own goals. So one is for the company within themselves. Most of the companies use a lot of tools and techniques to do it. It could be traceability to do an interpretation right from field to shelf in terms of where the material has come from, how has it been produced, and how it has been delivered to the market. Along with it, it is also for the consumer. So with growing consumer awareness, people are seeking good inputs in terms of has the raw material been sourced sustainably? Have the right manufacturing processes being used? What is the kind of quality that the company has maintained throughout their supply chain? So in case you need cold chain, has it been maintained throughout end to end? In case you need good manufacturing facilities, have they been really done? Raw materials also, have people really taken care of the environment while sourcing the raw materials and all? These are extremely important topics, and probably traceability is one important thing which helps us deliver this end to end. I'll give a small example from Mondelēz. So for example, we started putting in 100% sustainable cocoa in a few of our products, right? But before that, we had to ensure that we are able to prove it within ourselves and to our customers also in case somebody turns up. So extremely important topic, and it definitely gives you a competitive advantage in case you are able to prove the right environmental commitment as well as the quality commitment.
Right, thanks, absolutely. I'll come back to you again. Now, before I go to Mr. Ankur, I'll go to Mr. Sathyanarayanan. Mr. Sathyanarayanan, would you like to add your views also as to how within your organization you have been able to work in this particular space, and also your general assessment of the growing importance of sustainability and other factors?
Sure. I think we have a good representation of roti and kapda, but I think makan seems to be missing over here. I think the three fundamental aspects of consumerism, right? I think consumerism started with these three, sort of tenets. So I would represent kapda over here, or rather clothing, right? So I represent the fashion industry. I work for a company called Bewakoof.com. So we are a direct-to-consumer fashion brand, right? So why is this important, right? Why is sustainability important? Why is traceability important? Why is it becoming important to be more transparent with our consumers in terms of what we manufacture, from where we manufacture, from where we source the raw material, right? I think over a period of time, the need for cognition for consumers has significantly grown up. Right? Consumers today are more and more curious, as while a digital marketing person might boast that we probably, in the eternity of marketing, we are the closest to our consumers. It's also true vice versa, right? Consumers are pretty close to us. They're following us, they're watching us, what we do. Are we behaving responsibly or not, right? So, having said that, how do we demonstrate, sustainability and responsibility towards our consumers? One, the fashion industry being the oldest one, right? There's still a lot of cliches in terms of fabrics, in terms of yarns, in terms of sourcing, in terms of dyes, in terms of materials that we purchase, right? It is one industry which is known to sort of have crossed the path of sustainability, whether it's in terms of the yarn which is procured, whether it's the cotton which is procured, or whether it is the dye stuff that is environment friendly, right? So something that we do, right, is having a very inclusive consumer chain, right, wherein we have an option. We do not produce which our consumers do not want. So how do we do that, right? So we have an option for our consumers to vote for the designs that they like, right? And we do not have any intention of producing or manufacturing or designing something that my consumer is not going to purchase. Two, we have included our consumers in the value chain by getting them to design their own products and ship them, right? So we have a lean sort of a manufacturing system where we do not overproduce, right? We take design inputs from our consumers, and we have a very robust rating and review mechanism where our consumers share their happiness or disheartened regarding our products, and we work extensively on that. And most critically, we maintain the integrity of the supply chain, right? So when we say that we do have a sustainable collection in place, where we have used naturally procured dye stuff, we use dye stuff which does not pollute the environment. We use recycled products to make t-shirts or garments, right? We communicate that and we hold ourselves to the T when we actually manufacture them sustainably. Right? These are a few ways that we exhibit our responsibility to our consumers.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Ankur, would you like to add your initial remarks, especially around the sustainability part, given the fact that you come from a food industry and where having an end-to-end visibility across your supply chain, and also a lot of perishable item that you deal with it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jale, and hi everybody. I think I will pick up from what Punit spoke about, also being a food company. There are two ways. One is that how do you communicate to consumers, and internally how you have to have that commitment to really see whatever you do, you have greater emphasis on quality and sustainability. I come from food company, MTR Foods, and which is actually part of a Norwegian company called Orkla. So we have an idea how the world is moving, and we know that how in India also slowly things are going to move out here. We see very clearly there are two goals we have. The first goal is be sustainable and be local champion as far as sustainability is concerned. And we have actually taken clear goals. The goals about, first thing we really looked at, part of ESG, that environment, social governance, where we spoke about, there are three part of it. One is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Part of scope 1, we are saying that we really need to work towards see that whatever in-house, any production that we do, there has to be, we need to see that that gas emission will have to be brought to zero. We are working on renewable power. In fact, 75% of our factories run on renewable power. We are working on to be water neutral. Now, while we doing all this is of course an internal goal. Now, end of the day, the big question which is coming today is that all good work that we are doing, how we translate that and how consumers know about it. And there are ways where consumers can know about this. Now, today, one tool is, of course, the digital media, and through which we talk about kind of developments, kind of initiatives that we take. And second one is, of course, someone can visit website. But what I clearly see, it could be an early stage, but clearly see that like taking a cue from what's happening in other countries, slowly, I would see that prominence of QR code is going to come. That QR code on the even on e-com side, where somebody can scan it and actually know where the raw material was sourced from each batch. Because in the system today, we have got a system where I can trace back. We have got a forward traceability and we have got a backward traceability. Any item I pick it up today, I know from which, and that way for every company that way, they have done that from which supplier I've picked up the raw material batch. So if any problem happens, I can go back to the supplier, or anything I can go back to the supplier and see that, and the consumer can see whether it has been sourced from a sustainable supply. Like I give an example of a palm oil. Now, palm oil is a big area of concern. And are we procuring sustainable palm oil? RSPO palm oil? And that's what something we need to really look at. So to me, journey has started. A lot of sustainability work that we are doing today, but a lot of work will have to be done. It's only the beginning. We have a lot of visibility, but our job is to see that how we take the visibility to the consumer, and how consumer can see that whatever we are doing today, and today we go to a mass consumers. Probably what is there is that how can you go to a select consumer, and that one way is about QR code, which I really look at. But today is at a beginning stage. It may take some more time, but I clearly see that's the writing on the wall is very clear. That's the one way probably consumer would know how, the traceability part of it.
Right, absolutely. Now I'll go to Mr. Madhan. Mr. Madhan, you heard our speaker speaking about as to how they look at this important part of traceability and having an end-to-end visibility across entire supply value chain primarily. Since your organization work across different sectors in different geographies, would you like to share based on your experience as to how you see that a company should be demonstrating, and what are some of the pillars that need to be put in place while actually enabling customers to have a visibility about the origin, processing, and end use of a particular product?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Madhan. I represent Siemens Digital Industries Software, a division of the larger Siemens organization, which is into automation and so on. So my perspective is that, I think the first, from a sustainability standpoint, what companies first do is that how do customers perceive ourselves? My earlier panelist spoke about effective communication to your consumers. That's the easy part. The real difficult part comes in is to ensure that they are living by that belief system. So they address this in many ways. And Siemens, as a technology partner, has been working with customers in different areas, right? From supply chain sourcing, where the raw materials are coming from, how far they are traveling. We bring in technology interventions to support customers to gain real-time visibility into those metrics. They track into inbound raw material. And when it comes to manufacturing, what are the complex processes that they use? What kind of energy consumption is there due to the manufacturing process, and how much energy is offset by generating natural sources? That could be a visibility from an energy use case standpoint. And also when they process water, gas, steam, and all the other utilities that go into manufacturing a product, monitoring those systems right from the systems themselves and giving them real-time digital visibility. Those are some of the use cases. Moving on into how the finished goods are delivered to the end customers. How quickly can you deliver? What is the shortest distance that product can travel before it reaches the consumer? That is also another metric that some of our customers are tracking. Now, in all these different areas, they may have existing multidisciplinary systems. The idea is to bring information from different sources and provide meaningful real-time information, whether it is a sustainability metric or a quality metric. So we've had experiences of working across. And another example, Mr. Ankur mentioned about QR code, right? We recently had a beverage manufacturer, alcoholic beverage manufacturer, asking for providing, the source from sourcing to shelf. How can we provide a kind of a story around just, somebody buys a bottle of a beverage and then they scan the QR code. You need to give them a kind of an animated storytelling of how that the product was sourced, manufactured, and delivered to them. So these are multiple aspects, different facets. It's easier said than done, as spoken about before. But most companies have taken, of integrating all of these information to be sure for themselves. One is, filing reports from a regulatory standpoint, but it is coming into a belief system of the organization itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before I go to Punit, I'll just do a customary announcement for all the people who have joined today for this roundtable discussion organized by ET Retail and Siemens India. I'll request all of you to keep writing your, in case if you have any question to anyone, any of our speaker, you can write down in the chat, and in the end of this roundtable discussion, we'll be picking some of the questions. So all those will be replied. Moving to Mr. Punit, what Mr. Madhan was saying was primarily something around as to how do you provide an information which is going to educate our customer and ultimately winning the trust of the customer. And what we are noticing that, the closed loop manufacturing that leverage a kind of, data analytics and insight to drive a kind of continual improvement in production KPIs. So I would like to understand from you is like, in your views, what should be the immediate priorities for the industry leaders in order to gain the consumer trust and unlock the consumer feedback that you could get with the help of an integrated platform by providing more information in order to excel in your product design and innovation that all the organization envisages to do?
See, let me put it this way. So, see, I think manufacturing is the next, is going to be the next hub, which is going to give you competitive advantage across all functions of a company, right? And you have seen that in COVID. So companies which were able to manage their manufacturing and the supply chains well are the ones who came out of the COVID crisis really well. So manufacturing is the next to be. So I'll give you a simple example. So we have something called an IDF, an integrated digital factory at one of our plants in at Sri City, right? What it helps you is it gives you a real-time analysis of every parameter across every machine. So a person sitting in head office at Mumbai can see the parameters across every line and is able to manage and is able to check, right, and get the right feedback in case the manufacturing processes are running in the best possible way. So that's one, saying that manufacturing is going to be the next competitive advantage. Now, the point on how do we make it as a closed loop system and we take in the right feedback. So I think this is where I would say not only consumer feedback, but also demand planning comes in, saying that you need to get the right sense of demand. There are significant number of AI, ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning options that we have got as of now for demand forecasting, as well as getting customer feedback, so that you produce the right thing. You ensure that you manufacture it in a way that the consumer is able to get hold of the most freshest products. Especially in terms of food industry, it is extremely important.
Right.
And which is how that we also manage. So with AI, ML and demand forecasting, ensuring the right product reaches. In case you get a feedback in terms of quality, or a consumer has reached out saying that I don't like the taste of a particular product, which is where, going to the previous question, traceability comes in, right? Did you change any of the process? Did you change any of the suppliers? So a simple example, you could probably change a smallest thing like a supplier who gives you milk products or sugar, and you might find a change in the taste that the end consumer is getting, which is why traceability comes into picture, to get the right feedback and to analyze the right feedback from the consumer, so that you can change back your processes to what the consumer really likes.
Right.
So I think closed loop manufacturing system, ensuring that manufacturing helps you to deliver the right product at the right time, and ensuring that the manufacturing systems are set up in the best possible manner is extremely important. I'll give you one more example. So we have set up our lines, I would say, in two different ways. One is mass production and the second is customization. So there are a lot of, for every company, there would be products which would be mass utilized, right? So where you have the most efficient lines, where you have economies of scale, and you deliver it from the biggest lines that you have. But similarly, for every company, you would also have customized products which people need. So you would need very small lots, right? So you also need to have those smaller lines which are able to fulfill those needs of the customer. So it has to be the right mix between mass production and the right mix between customization for the consumer so that the consumer gets the best experience out of it.
Right, absolutely. But even both of them, I believe that consumer trust and the unlocking the feedback pattern. I mean, the feedback that you receive from the customer that ultimately helps you in terms of improving your product innovation. Mr. Sathyanarayanan, would you like to add your views, especially around the closed loop manufacturing that we are talking about, and especially role of high-end automation, especially with the help of analytics tools and all?
Sure. I think the question had two parts to this, right? One was in terms of how will closed loop manufacturing really help the overall process. Two is, as industry leaders, like what should industry leaders primarily do? What are the top 2-3 things that they should be doing, right? So to me, I think that's a more pertinent or a more critical question to answer, right? One, I think what is the measure of traceability and sustainability, right? I think we need to define a clear metric around it so that the consumers have a clear understanding of what to see. It will be great to give visibility of the manufacturing process to a consumer, but what will the consumer make out of it, right? What does TPM, right, or PPM for that matter, right, or what GSM, right? Does it actually make sense for my consumer, right? How do I define metrics to my consumer that my consumer will understand, right? And then how do I backward integrate my processes, which sort of gives visibility to these sort of metrics? That's the first one. Two is standardizations and certifications, right? In the sense, if not metrics, then one thing that our consumers do understand are certificates, right? Whether it is the FSSAI when it comes to food, right? Whether it comes to the Khadi mark when it comes to apparel and fashion, right? So I think this segment is pretty weak in our country today, right? With respect to consumer goods. If this is established, if there is a lot of investment that goes into it, certifying agencies, if they are established and they're propagated well, so that our consumers basically understand, right? I think the consumers will primarily have a base to refer and compare products from one to other. The third thing is educating our consumers, right, on how to measure a certain product, right, whether it's on sustainability or in terms of quality, right, or in terms of experience, right. A lot of consumers, we have been wearing our shirts for a very long time, right? So how many of you actually know the composition of the garment that you're wearing, right? The polyester which is there in your shirt, was that sustainably synthesized, right? So I think it's also critical for leaders to educate consumers. I think these three would be the broadest tenets, and obviously, needless to say, a closed loop manufacturing system which is rich in data will definitely aid this with, I think, a good help from certifying bodies and standardized metrics. Yeah.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Also, the fact that the more information we provide, we are more educating our consumer, and they will be in a better position to take a call and possibly appreciate the work that in terms of the product innovation that is being done by different organizations and brands. Mr. Ankur, would you like to add your views, especially around the closed loop manufacturing and the integrated platform, high-end automation and data analytics part, which could play a very important role?
Yeah, so I would say that over the years, every company invests a lot in ERP, and in that ERP, they build the traceability system, and everyone has got different data, right from raw material data to quality parameters to production data. And today, what we are really looking at, that probably there's a requirement of something more. And to get into that, I would like to say that what has changed in the last few years. If I really look at 5 years or 10 years back, there were fewer brands. Expectation from consumer was less. Your internet wasn't there. People are not so much educated. But in the last 5 to 7 years, we really looked at the three big components which is there in everybody's mind, and a lot of education which is happening. So one is health. When it comes to food, this is the food is medicine. So the health parameter is important. Second important parameter is about sustainability. And the third important thing is that, are we doing something which is climate friendly? Now, this slowly that education is happening, and definitely I would see the 5-7 years down the line, not many people will start talking about that, and that would become imperative for every company to start working. And companies who are going to take advantage of as a first mover will really go. And today you also see plethora of brands have come in. with consumer preference and expectation changing and brands coming in, we really see the different needs have come up. At the same time, also we need to understand that earlier consumer feedback was through that feedback, either mail or phone call. Today, there are different platforms where the feedback is coming. If you really look at the feedback is coming through different social media, it could be your Facebook, it could be Instagram, it could be from anywhere. Well, most of the companies we are today collecting those feedback, but how we are processing those feedback is important. We have got one ERP system. In that ERP systems, also we need to see that how we collect those feedback and make it a meaningful analytics so that it goes into my production systems, it goes into my design, and goes into my development. That is one priority which I really see the companies they have to undertake, and most of the companies have undertaken. So I just tell you that for our company, of course, we decided whether we do it by ourselves or we do it by a third party. Because a third party, they've got economies of scale, and therefore they can do a better analytics of that. That should be the real input to us to say what kind of feedback I get, and therefore how quickly I take action, how I can go back to that customer. Sometimes, when it comes on social media, one, and I get a good feedback, and second, it is also very important for us to go back to that customer, and I can go back to the customer because I can connect to it.
Right.
So to me, the priority for two priorities I would say, and we're really looking at, one is the visibility. The visibility in our closed loop manufacturing system is very, very important. Each and every touch point, which Punit spoke about digital plant. We've also started our factory where each and every machines we are digitalizing, and having the touch point is very important. And second is about how to get information from all across and integrate it and try to have some meaningful analytics and push back to the design and development team and also to production team so that we continuously improve, continuously be consistent, we continuously communicate with our consumers.
Right. Absolutely. I'll come back to you again. I'll go to Mr. Madhan now. Mr. Madhan, what Mr. Ankur is saying that we have a heterogeneity in terms of getting feedback from different channels, despite the fact that you might be using an omni-channel platform, but you are getting from different sources, and there actually an integrated platform becomes quite important. Would you like to share, based on your experience and talking to some of your customers, what should be the key priority, especially from a perspective of closed loop manufacturing, which leverages data analytics, and that ultimately helps you in terms of getting insight and improving your product KPIs?
Sure, yeah. Closed loop manufacturing for different manufacturers has its own complexity. For example, the panelists have, again, diverse business. Mondelēz, where you produce most of the confectionaries in a single plant, you're sourcing a lot of raw material, whereas a garment retail in Bewakoof may be largely sourced from or even supplier manufactured, for example. So the degree of what you can achieve in closed loop manufacturing really depends on where you're producing and so on. So the complexity is pretty heavy. Monitoring machines, how they're producing, what is the throughput they are providing is one aspect of it. But if you look at multiple functions of the business, produce what you can sell, right? Don't produce more when you cannot sell. So demand planning plays a key role, as Punit mentioned. There are missing pieces in many manufacturers. For example, you're monitoring what you're producing. You're getting a demand planning from your sales organization, but you have limitations and constraints with respect to incoming material and also what the machines can produce, and employees don't show up at some point. So near-term scheduling is another key aspect where people can plug that particular gap in a closed loop process, right? So all the silos of systems, look at what are the big gaps in your processes. If you're doing scheduling and constraint management with spreadsheets, you may want to bring in a system to address that. And also tying in these loose ends from one system to another, make sure the information travels reasonably seamlessly as your business priorities demand. We can't have completely automated system. You have the advantage of setting up greenfield plants as digitally native sites. But 9 out of 10 plants which produce products today are brownfield plants set up over a period of time, fairly heavy on capital assets. You cannot throw them out on one fine day wanting to monitor data from all of these. So companies are devising their own methods, and tech partners like us are helping ways and means to source data from dated assets, number one. Do limited interventions on the physical machines to gather data, bring in digital interventions on gaps like scheduling and other aspects, for example. These are ways and means. We are writing a roadmap for pretty much every customer, and each customer scenario is pretty unique. And the way we go about, building that digital thread is unique for each type of business, whether you're producing chocolates or you're producing garments.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Punit, earlier you spoke about having a continuity of the visibility and traceability, and what we are also noticing that companies and brands are now designing, developing, and deploying a kind of low-code platform to aggregate and verify and certify and enable information sharing across supply chain ecosystem in order to improve the visibility across entire product line. Would you like to share your experience within your organization as to how did you ensure the continuity of the visibility and traceability?
Sure.
I think you earlier mentioned a couple of things, if you could add to that.
Thanks, Ujale. So, I would say there are two things in it. One is forward traceability, and what is equally important is backward integration of the information flow from shelf to feedback also, so that you ensure that you are able to manage your manufacturing sourcing in the right and the best possible way. See, in terms of how does information flow back, right? So there are a few examples which I gave, like for example, IDF, integrated digital factories, are like the factories of the future, which will help you monitor most of your processes to the best possible extent with the minimum possible manpower. So these are like the technologies of the future, which I believe going forward, most of the companies will start adopting, so that you are able to control each and every parameter, whether it be process parameter, whether it be traceability, or whether it be the quality parameters in the best possible extent. So that's one. Secondly, it is also important that you okay, so it's not easiest, or it is easier said than done, or in terms of digitally enabling the information flow from field to shelf, right? But however, most of the companies have been able to do it either in bits or parts, or by using a multiple softwares across different fields, right? So for example, I think the end is demand forecasting, right, which then flows back into manufacturing and material procurement. So how do you digitally enable your supply chain so that the right feedback follows through? So these are probably the two most important points, and I believe there's something that we are still working on, is something called a digital twin, right? Now, digital twin, you would probably have it in 3 or 4 different parts. One could be a supplier digital twin, manufacturing, and the rest of the supply chain, which we call it as from manufacturing to the shelf. Now, if you have good visibility across all these parts of a supply chain, it is easiest to manage the most efficient manufacturing, as well as take in every input that comes in from the consumer, so that you are able to build into the system as quickly as possible, and you don't have something called a bullwhip effect, where the inputs coming from the consumer are pretty late and you would have missed the cycle for demand forecasting. Right. So a real-time input in terms of demand, a real-time input that goes to manufacturing, and the capability to tweak manufacturing in a way that you are able to accommodate those requests from the consumer, both in terms of demand as well in terms of feedback, in terms of quality, is probably the next steps that most of the companies should be going towards.
Right. Mr. Sathyanarayanan, would you like to add your views, especially around the ensuring the continuity of visibility and traceability part?
Sure. So I think the business model at play sort of has a very critical role to play over here, right? We, being a direct-to-consumer brand, helps us in keeping a complete tab on, right from our raw materials to what we produce to what we dispatch to our consumers, right? A typical distribution model generally brings in the complexity of demand planning and being very accurate, and especially when in use cases such as Mondelēz and MTR, right, where we have perishable products, it becomes more complex, right? It might be a little simpler problem for fashion retailers or fashion direct to consumers to solve for. And how we do that is we have complete visibility in terms of the raw materials that we do produce, that we do procure. We have an in-house manufacturing plant, and we have an in-house printing plant which documents data at every stage, right? So our printing machines do have the combination of the dye stuff that was used in terms of designing a particular print, right? But what we have gone ahead, right, taking a thread from the Walmart use case, right, where they have used blockchain to completely source the raw material to drive the consumer journey right from the raw material to the consumers, to the specific example from Carrefour where any food supplement, right? If I'm a consumer, I know from the fact I have a simple data engine that gives me the complete visibility of where it is getting grown, as it is getting grown, right? And where is it getting packed and stored, and when am I going to receive it, right? I think while we are far away from that, one step that we have made towards that, right, is including our consumers in the overall supply chain process. As I mentioned before, on Bewakoof platform, you as a consumer can design your own merchandise. You get to vote for what you want to get manufactured, what you want to buy, right? I think inclusivity of consumers and backed with specific data on the raw material and documentation of each and every process, ensuring it is clear, ensuring that the data is in harmony with the product, and making that consumable for a consumer are, to me, the most critical aspects of the piece of the puzzle at this point of time.
Right. Mr. Ankur, if you can add your views also around the visibility and traceability part that Mr. Punit and Mr. Sathyanarayanan talked about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I will say that today everyone is talking about a lot of data, and every network, every point, every node is getting digitized. I will say why happening. The reason what we have seen that there are three things. You talked about low code, no code. Second is about cloud, and the third is about software as a service. The moment the software has moved from capex to software as a service, the cost of cost has come down. The cost of data capture has come down. And that is where we have seen every company. Now, what we have done, and I'll just tell you that we have undertaken a project where 50% we have completed. Our factory is going to be completely digitized. Each and every data point, right from the quality data to our output data to yield, everything is going to be captured through system. Now, that one thing, what we are seeing that very important for us, other than the traceability SAP that we had. 5-6 years back, we actually talked about two systems. We talked about that every company should have ERP, and then we talked about every company should have a demand planner and supply planner, a demand and supply planning system, be it APO, be it JDA or SAP APO or JDA. You would like to go for that. Today, the moment the data cost of data has come down, this is a huge opportunity for every company to really look at how each and every node can we capture data, and that's how we started first. Capturing manufacturing data. And that's where we see the big thrust happening in manufacturing. Second, we have started now moving from a demand planning to how can you get to a demand sensing, which is very, very important. And what Punit talked about, that if you have demand sensing, and that is the time we can have reflexive supply chain, where supply chain can work on a lean model. And that's going to take some time, but that's where we are going ahead. And we see that we're at the right space today where the cost of data is less. We also need to really look at that it has to come down further, because what is today important is that I will always say that only the large company probably will try to automate something, and the ecosystem probably the few suppliers. But to get the real benefit out of it, and if the consumers need to get out of the thing, greater collaboration also will be required to see that entire ecosystem, how do we really get all the network data is up and do a far greater analytics.
Right. Mr. Madhan, what Mr. Ankur is saying seems absolutely fine, because your source of data is very heterogeneous. Again, you have a different types of data, and what actually the low-code platform enable you to basically integrate those things on the go without too much putting into software development and other parts, and possibly you can focus on your core business activity. Would you like to share your views as to how you look at this concept of having a continuity of visibility at different stages of your supply chain, production, and sending it to the consumer, and how those could be enabled with the help of low code platforms?
Sure. So low code and no code is a very hot topic with probably every one of our customer conversations. Organizations have come to realize that there is no commercially off-the-shelf solution to address all of their problems, minus the enterprise systems, which cover large parts of your functioning, the ERP, the CRM, the supply chain system, and so on. But there are still smaller pockets which are unique to each one of their businesses. If it was 10 years back, the IT leader would have stepped forward and said, I'm going to hire a bunch of programmers and then, build something to stitch these loose ends. But oftentimes companies have realized that the cost of owning that technology, maintaining it, making sure that it's upgrading with the rest of the enterprise systems is proving to be extremely complex, right? To the extent that it's with, drawing them back in terms of their efficiencies. So, and hence most IT leaders are looking at obviously low code, no code. Plus, can I do it as a software as a service, a managed service option, so that I don't have to staff my IT organization deeply. But all of these solutions are primarily driven by business need, right? So you need a business direction in terms of what you actually need the system or process automation to do. And hence it needs to be closely developed in conjunction with actual business users. You can't outsource it to a company and come after 4 weeks and then say, show me what you've developed. It's not going to work, the longer development cycle. So organizations are taking it, but they want to get to the finish line faster and leave most of the infra management and the maintenance of the applications to external partners, so that the cost of ownership is much lower and the people management is easier. So this is a very hot topic, and it is probably the kind of binding technology that has come of age to help customers reach their digitalization goals much, much faster. Okay. I also see very, very interesting questions for our panelists on the Q&A. So it'll be very interesting to see specific questions and how we have addressed that. So I'll probably cut my...
Absolutely. So anyway, we are in the last leg of the discussion. So I'll request our attendees, in case if they have anything, they can write it down in the Q&A section, and we'll be taking few of them. A couple of questions have already come to me, so I'll be taking after this round. Earlier, you mentioned about tracing back through the initial channel of a raw material and collecting information on origin, composition, manufacturing process, and flow at each step of the value chain is easier said than done. Then in your views, how well thought of digitalization strategy can help in reconciling the data in a clean way? Because earlier Mr. Ankur mentioned that you might be having a very diverse set of data set from where you are actually getting information.
So as I think most of the panelists sort of mentioned, right? So data being available seems to be a lesser problem than cleaning up of data, right? And I think that's where the low code, no code mechanism sort of comes into play, right? How to the overall analytics of it in terms of pulling out the relevant data, making it into a form which is consumable, and which makes sense to consumers, right? And then having that on your catalog or on the product display. The larger problem is that the source of data, right? Like, how does this establish trust with the customer as a consumer, right? If a brand is going to portray that this particular product has raw materials which basically lit the lamp of a weaver somewhere in a weaver society down in the remotest part of the country, right? It might be a great selling point, but how does a customer actually believe it, right? So I think fetching data, cleaning up data, right? Presenting data, right? Well, all of this today definitely is possible, but what is more critical right now is to establish the credibility of data, right? And that, I think, technologies like blockchain or Web 3.0, etc., right, which are predominantly are third party, which are also, don't have an inherent skin in the game. When basically an establishment comes from there, it makes better sense to consumers, right? So to sort of long story short, to the question, right? There is data available. Harmony of data isn't available. I think that is the next problem that we should be looking at solving. At the same time, the representation of the data, at least the source of it cannot be the company in itself, right? It has to be a technology. It has to be a third party which has authority in claiming the source, which has establishes authority on clearly identifying patterns and have credibility over it.
Right.
To me, that's how a consumer will be looking at it.
Absolutely. Before I go to Mr. Punit, I'll go to Mr. Ankur, and I'm trying to take a couple of questions from audience as well. So this is specifically with your name for you, Mr. Ankur. And the question is, how do you see the role of farm to fork technology based on QR code for the products?
I really see, and I spoke about this, I see that, because I said we are a Norwegian company, and we see that in Scandinavia, how consumers are looking at it, and probably 5-7 years down the line is going to come. I see that, yes, a lot of consumers are going to demand that from what is the origin of the product, from where it has come, is it from a sustainable source? And 5 to 7 years down the line, we may see the QR code in India for most of the food products is going to be a reality. Initially, a demand from consumer could be less, but the moment the threshold comes, we will see many companies will be forced to get into that. So it's always a consumer pull, and when the consumer would start expecting more and more, we will see that could be the requirement. Every company, I can tell you, at the back end started looking at this consumer trend very, very clearly to see what is the next step that they need to do.
And this is the next one is for both of you, Mr. Punit and Mr. Madhan. So possibly Punit, you can take first, and then Madhan can join in. How does one build traceability right from the source, which is farm level, and what technology, including the QR code, invisible link, have you seen that can be implemented in the natural fiber supply chain? If you could give some, possibly Madhan, but once you speak, possibly you can give some global example as well. Mr. Punit.
Thanks, Ujale. So, see, okay, I am not sure if I will be able to answer specifically on the fiber, but let me put in this way. See, and I think traceability is extremely important. And as we speak about it, and what Ankur spoke in terms of, I think blockchain is the best way to manage traceability.
Right.
But before we go there, I think there are two important points on why traceability is required. And we spoke about it before. One is for the consumer, and the second is also for the internal company, right? So now consumers will keep giving you feedbacks in terms of do they like the taste of the product? Do they like the product itself? Do they want some changes in the product which are required, right? So tracing back on saying that what do you tweak in your product to get to the right formulation, be it a food product or it could be as simple as a shirt, it is extremely important, which is why traceability is important. Now, how do you manage traceability from going from field to the shelf? There are n number of softwares available. ERP software is probably the simplest thing that most of the companies work on. But there are a lot of builds on top of these ERP softwares which help you on a very good traceability, right? Tracing back the raw materials from an ERP software is not only time consuming, it also requires sufficient effort, and sometimes you might not be able to trace back to the last T in case you don't have the right data which goes into your system. Right. So hence it is important to have the right softwares which are available. Most of them sit on top of your ERPs, which will help you to trace back the data. In fact, we are working on one of the traceability products. So simple example, we currently take like 24 hours to trace back in case of a quality issue. We are trying to see, can you reduce it down to 2 hours and next to 15 minutes, right? Using blockchain to trace back in case of a consumer complaint which has come in, right? Now, those are the technological advances which are possible as of today, right? Instead of screening through n number of lines in an ERP system, a blockchain technology combined with a QR code could be as simple as picking up your phone, and checking where the raw materials right from the supplier to the manufacturing process to which warehouse did it go, and which shop did the consumer pick it up from.
Right.
So to trace back what went wrong in the entire supply chain would be pretty easy once most of the companies, and what Ankur added, saying that today I don't think too many companies are there, but going forward as the technology develops, it would not only be good to have, it might probably be something must to have for most of the companies.
Right, absolutely. I think on the blockchain part, if you look at the pharma companies, they have been exploring it like anything, especially to have a completely end-to-end control as to how those products are being consumed, for how long it's available in the market. Mr. Madhan, would you like to share? Would you like to add something on the question that was asked? Also, so if you could give some of international example in case if you have something which can elaborate this questions further.
Sure, I have local examples as well. So the tech is the easier part. Building some traceability solution on an ERP system is pretty easy because all of these systems are super matured. Tracking, having people enter specific traceability information is the challenge because people commit mistakes if you're not directly capturing from the physical environment. Let's say if you're sourcing a bale of cotton, you want to track that or trace that, you can't expect the sourcing point to be so digitally enabled to key in a 10-digit serial number into a system or a mobile app, right? So I've seen in the past, not just in Siemens, but my experience that, a garment goes through very chemical-based washing and heating up to about 300-400 degrees in terms of it's boiled when it's dyed, right? So we had the bale tracked using a QR code, the cloth roll. But when it gets cut and stitched, it just could not sustain any kind of treatment. QR code will not stay. Any other tracking mechanism would not stay. But we did find an RFID, which is like a cloth, a flexible piece, which can be literally using heat, can be ironed on top of a garment. And that goes into the washing cycle and it does come back and the data is still readable. Right. So the physical to digital interaction is the key. If you depend on people to key in the right amount of data for you to establish traceability, that becomes more and more challenging because you could get wrong data and you end up cleaning that data. As Satya explained, that could be, you're just seeing wrong dashboard, wrong information, right? So the idea is to see how physically you can, with least amount of manual interventions or, point of failure, you can capture that data. So quite a bit of sensing mechanisms have come of age, a lot of innovation happening in that area. Specifically, we could discuss on the use case that the question has been asked.
Right, absolutely. I think we have by and large exhausted our time. There is one more question, so possibly maybe Mr. Ankur or Sathyanarayanan could take. Are there any tech vendors, SaaS platform that you'd recommend for traceability? So, this is very specific and direct question. So maybe not taking the name of some.
Clearly, I think this is Madhan's area of expertise. I would rather.
Okay, all right. I think possibly we'll leave it because it's directly about a particular vendor and all. So I think we have completely exhausted our time, Mr. Sathyanarayanan, Mr. Ankur, Mr. Madhan, Mr. Punit. Thank you so much for taking out your time and speaking on the topic of leveraging traceability and lifecycle intelligence organized by ET Retail and Siemens India. I think you all spoke quite well, especially on the commitment, why the commitment to the quality, sustainability, and environmental responsibility is important for the brand. I think your views also on the closed loop manufacturing and as to how data analytics part could be leveraged in order to have a continual improvement in the production APIs. And also all of you spoke quite well on the importance of visibility and traceability part, given the fact that it's not so easy to have, and why we should have an integrated digital platform strategy in place, which can actually read the data from different sources and possibly could give a better of understanding of what we would like to do. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful panelist. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure interacting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.